The first time I visited Mike Cohen's workshop, I nearly wrote him off as just another primitive human mechanic. The building itself was unremarkable, a prefab garage on the outskirts of New Denver. Its weathered sign reading Cohen's Repairs, "If it's broke, we'll fix it," in fading holographic letters. The lot was littered with what I assumed was junk: half-dismantled hover cars, scrapped anti-grav units, and at least 3 defunct atmospheric processors. I was there on official business conducting a routine survey of human technological development for the Galactic Council. Normally, I wouldn't have bothered with such a small operation, but our scanners had detected some unusual energy signatures from the area. Given humanity's tendency to meddle with things they shouldn't, we had to investigate every anomaly. Mike was elbow deep in the guts of what I recognized as a salvaged Stentorian plasma injector when I arrived. He didn't even look up at first, just called out, "Be with you in a sec," while making minute adjustments with a tool that appeared to be cobbled together from spare parts. When he finally emerged, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag, I was struck by how ordinary he looked. Average height for a human, slightly rounded in the middle, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He wore a simple jumpsuit with Mike embroidered on the chest pocket, and a utility belt that had definitely seen better days. "Welcome to my humble shop," he said, grinning as he gestured around the cluttered space. "What can I help you with?" I introduced myself with my full title, Assistant Overseer of Human Technological Development for the Galactic Council, expecting the usual mix of awe and nervousness these visits typically produced. Instead, Mike just nodded and offered me a cup of coffee. As we walked through his workshop, I couldn't help but notice the odd juxtaposition of primitive and advanced technology. A quantum calibrator sat next to what humans called a socket wrench. A holographic diagnostic system shared space with a mechanical clock. "Quite the collection you have here," I remarked, trying to make sense of the apparent chaos. "Though I'm curious about these modifications to alien tech." "You do know that's technically restricted under galactic law." Mike shrugged, taking a sip from a mug that read, "Trust me, I'm a mechanic. Can't fix what you don't understand, and folks bring me their ships to fix." So, he trailed off, tinkering with something on his workbench. That's when I made the mistake that would change the course of galactic history. In an attempt to establish authority, I mentioned our latest achievement. Our fastest ships can reach 0.98 C in real space. Nothing in the galaxy comes close. Mike chuckled. Not mockingly, there was something else in his expression, a glint in his eyes that I would come to recognize as the most dangerous thing in the universe: human curiosity mixed with stubborn determination. "That's the theoretical limit, I explained, feeling somewhat defensive. "Nothing can exceed the speed of light. It's a fundamental constant of the universe." Mike wiped his hands again and walked over to a cluttered whiteboard covered in calculations I hadn't noticed before. "You know what's funny about constants?" he asked, picking up a marker. "People always assume they're solid, unchangeable." He started sketching something that looked suspiciously like a modified warp field equation. "But sometimes constants are just variables we haven't figured out how to change yet." I should have reported him right then, should have shut down his operation and confiscated his equipment. But I didn't understand what I was seeing. Like everyone else in New Denver, I saw what I expected to see: just another human mechanic with delusions of grandeur. I left his shop that day with a polite warning about regulations and a promise to return for a follow-up inspection. As I walked back to my ship, I could have sworn I heard him whistling an old human tune, something about a highway and a danger zone. I had no idea that I had just witnessed the beginning of humanity's greatest revolution in space travel, or that this unassuming mechanic was about to rewrite the laws of physics with nothing more than spare parts and stubborn determination. Looking back now, I really should have paid more attention to the equations on that whiteboard. The paper that shook the foundations of galactic physics wasn't published in any prestigious journal. It appeared on something humans call archive, a preprint server that anyone could access. The title was deceptively simple: Practical Applications of Hyperspatial Mechanics for Everyday Space Travel by Michael Cohen. Most of us missed it initially. A paper by an unknown human mechanic with no academic credentials. It wasn't worth the processing power to download. But then Professor Shin Tal of the Rigel Institute happened to read it during what humans call a bathroom break, and nearly fell off their waste extraction unit. The math was elegant. Unconventional, yes, but elegant. Where our scientists had spent centuries trying to bend space-time through brute force, Mike had found the loose threads in reality's fabric and simply untied them. His equations weren't just theoretical, they were practical, filled with the kind of notions you'd expect from someone who had spent years fixing broken ships and thinking there's got to be a better way. When confronted about his breakthrough, Mike was characteristically understated. "Been looking at your engine designs for years," he said, still focused on replacing a customer's faulty navigation system. "Nice work, but overcomplicated. Like using a sledgehammer to hang a picture." The academic community's response was predictably dismissive. The Galactic Science Academy published a scathing critique, citing fundamental misunderstandings of basic physics and dangerous oversimplification of complex phenomena. They particularly objected to Mike's hand-drawn diagrams, which looked more like a mechanic's repair manual than proper scientific documentation. Mike's response: he built a prototype in his garage, using spare parts. I was there the day he tested it, though I shouldn't have been. My superiors had explicitly ordered me to avoid contact after his paper was published. But something about Mike's quiet confidence had stuck with me, and I had to see for myself. The ship looked like it had been cobbled together from scrap mining vessels and defunct satellite parts. The hyperdrive itself was housed in what I'm fairly certain used to be an industrial food processor. When I pointed this out, Mike just grinned and said, "You'd be surprised how similar making a smoothie is to folding space." He had somehow managed to get all the necessary permits, though I suspect the local authorities didn't fully understand what they were approving. The test flight was classified as a modified sublight engine demonstration. Modified, right? I expected the test to fail spectacularly. Best case scenario, nothing would happen. Worst case, we'd be cleaning up atomic particles scattered across 3 states. What I didn't expect was for Mike to flip a switch labeled Geofast marker, and for his junker of a ship to simply vanish. It reappeared 17 seconds later. "Took a quick loop around Jupiter," Mike announced through the comms, casual as if he'd just popped down to the store for milk. "Needs some fine-tuning, though. Bit of a rattle above 300 C. The next few hours were chaos. Military vessels descended on the area. When government officials arrived in sleek black vehicles, scientists demanded explanations. Through it all, Mike kept tinkering with his ship, muttering about power efficiency and optimizing the quantum field harmonics. When asked why he'd freely published his research instead of patenting it, he looked genuinely puzzled. "Space is too big for just one species to figure out," he said, handing a bewildered military officer a notebook full of additional calculations. "Besides, more minds working on it means more improvements. I want to see what other folks can come up with." That's when I finally understood what made humans different from the rest of us. It wasn't just their curiosity or their determination, it was their complete inability to keep a galaxy-shaking discovery to themselves. Where any other species would have hidden such knowledge, humans shared it freely, almost compulsively. By the end of the week, garage inventors across Earth were building their own hyperdrives. Within a month, major corporations had functioning prototypes. And Mike? He went right back to fixing ships, though now he had a new sign in his window. Hyperdrive tuning, reasonable rates, no warranty for interdimensional drift. I remember the day SpaceX announced their Lightskipper commercial transport line. Their CEO stood on stage in a sleek suit, promising London to Mars in under an hour. The crowd went wild. I was more interested in Mike Cohen's reaction. He was in the audience, still wearing his workshop coveralls, nodding appreciatively while making notes on what looked like a pizza box. "Good design," he told me later, pointing at his grease-stained sketches. "But they're thinking too linearly. Watch what happens next." What happened next was pure chaos. Lockheed Martin unveiled their military-grade hyperdrive 2 weeks later. The demonstration involved a ship jumping from Earth orbit to Neptune's in the time it took the presenter to say "and now." The chief of staff nearly choked on his coffee. Boeing responded by announcing their Hyperline passenger service. Blue Origin claimed they could do it better. Virgin Galactic said they could do it cheaper. Each announcement triggered a fresh wave of stock market frenzies and technological leapfrogging. But the real revolution wasn't happening in corporate boardrooms or military bases. It was happening in garages. Mike's freely shared designs had sparked something in the human collective consciousness. Suddenly, every hobbyist with a wrench and a dream was building their own hyperdrive. They called themselves speed hackers, and they were everywhere. A teenager in Mumbai figured out how to improve quantum field stability using modified smartphone parts. A retired engineer in Seoul discovered you could increase efficiency by 40% by running the hyperdrive's calculations through old gaming console processors. A group of college students in Lagos found a way to harvest background radiation for power. Each innovation was immediately shared, improved upon, and pushed further. Humans had turned faster-than-light travel into an open-source project. The Galactic Council was horrified. You can't just let amateurs modify space-time. One of my superiors shrieked during an emergency session. There are protocols, procedures, safety regulations, but you couldn't stop it. Every attempt at regulation just drove the community to innovate harder. When told they couldn't use certain materials, they invented new ones. When told certain configurations were too dangerous, they found safer alternatives. When told something was impossible, they took it as a personal challenge. I visited Mike's workshop during this period. His garage had become a bizarre mix of repair shop and unofficial research hub. Quantum physicists' inexpensive suits shared bench space with grease-stained mechanics. A Nobel laureate was arguing with a high school student about hyperspatial geometry, while Mike fixed a broken-down family shuttle in the background. "How do you feel about all this?" I asked him, gesturing at the chaos. He wiped his hands on a rag and grinned. "Remember when I said space was too big for one species to figure out? Turns out it's too big for any one group of humans too. But all of us together." He pointed to a wall covered in picture ships of every size and shape, built by people from every corner of Earth. Now that's something special. The pace of innovation was staggering. Ships started appearing that could cross the galaxy in days, then hours. Someone figured out how to surf quantum waves between dimensions. Another group discovered you could use nested hyperfields to achieve what they called recursive FT, effectively traveling faster than light. The rest of the galaxy watched in a mixture of awe and terror as humans turned the impossible into an extreme sport. Racing leagues formed. Records were set and broken within hours. A new class of daredevils emerged, pushing experimental drives to their limits and broadcasting their adventures across the net. And through it all, Mike kept working in his garage, still fixing everyday ships, still tinkering with improvements. When asked about the corporate giants now dominating the industry he'd created, he just shrugged. "They're all missing the point," he said, hands deep in the guts of what looked like a normal family transport but definitely wasn't. "It's not about being the fastest. It's about proving that impossible is just a word." I noticed he'd added another sign to his workshop window. "Speed limits are more like speed suggestions." 200 years later, I still have Mike Cohen's original whiteboard hanging in my office at the Galactic Council. The equations are faded now, but you can still make out his neat mechanical handwriting and those peculiar little diagrams that looked more like doodles than scientific notation. New species joining the council always ask about it, especially when they learn its significance. "That's it," they say. "That's what started it all." It's hard to explain to them what it was like, watching humanity take their first stumbling steps into faster-than-light travel and then immediately break into a sprint. How do you describe to a species that spent millennia carefully advancing their technology that humans treated the laws of physics like a suggestion box? Mike's old garage is a historical landmark now. The Cohen Institute for Impossible Physics stands next door, a gleaming tower of quantum glass and probability steel. Every morning, researchers walk past the preserved workshop with its faded signs and rusted tools. Some of them even leave offerings, broken engine parts, outdated quantum processors, stripped gears. A tradition started by Mike's great-granddaughter, Dr. Sarah Cohen. "Grandpa Mike always said inspiration comes from broken things," she told me once, while showing me their latest prototype. He said anyone can build something new, but it takes a special kind of genius to look at something broken and see possibility. The prototype she was showing me that day was, well, I'm still not entirely sure what it was. The official documentation called it a quantum tunneling mass displacement drive, but the engineers just called it the Cohen Special. It worked on principles Mike had apparently sketched on a napkin during lunch 2 centuries ago. "He knew we'd figure it out eventually," Sarah said, patting the hulking machine with the same casual affection her great-grandfather used to show his old tools. "He just didn't have the tech to build it himself." That's the thing about human innovation that still baffles the council. They don't wait until they have everything figured out. They don't even wait until they have the right tools. They just start. They build what they can with what they have, and trust that future generations will fill in the gaps. Last week, I had to brief the council on current human FTLA research projects. The list included ships that quantum tunnel through space-time like subatomic particles, drives that fold dimensions like origami, engines that treat time as a suggestion rather than a constant, something called a probability surfing hyperdrive that I'm pretty sure breaks several laws of reality. The newer council members were horrified. "How do we compete with this?" they asked. "How do we keep up?" I showed them the sign that now hangs in the council chamber, the one we took from Mike's workshop after he passed. If you can't break the speed of light, break the rules that made it. You don't compete with humans, I told them. You don't try to keep up. You watch, you learn, and you accept that they will never, ever stop pushing boundaries. Just yesterday, I received a message from Sarah. They're testing something new at the Institute, something that makes their previous breakthroughs look like child's play. The details are so classified that even I, with my position on the council, only got the vaguest outline. But there was a note at the bottom that made me laugh out loud. Turns out he theorized this back in the day, just couldn't build it yet. Said he got the idea while fixing a broken microwave. Classic Mike. I keep telling the council that trying to regulate human FTL development is like trying to catch starlight with a net. They're not racing against us or even against each other, they're racing against possibility itself, and somehow impossibly they're winning. The universe keeps saying you can't. Humans keep answering, watch me. And somewhere, I like to think Mike Cohen is still tinkering in some cosmic garage, grinning that unassuming grin of his, casually rewriting the laws of physics between oil changes and engine repairs. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it a lot. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. Feel free to comment and share this story too. It helps the channel grow. Let's make this channel huge together.